Welcome to the Legally Ever After Real Estate Podcast, where we help you build, protect, and pass on your assets. I'm your host, estate planning attorney, Pamela Moss-Garrett. Let's get started. All right, today we have Kyle Chiasson, the owner of Best Option Restoration. He is going to be talking to us about damage control for real estate investments. Welcome, Kyle.
Thank you for having me today.
So, if people are, whether they're doing a fix and flip or they're holding on to their investments, what have you seen? What are your tips from the restoration side of how they can really prevent and also take care of damage on their property?
Good question. So I'm going to start with mold because that is the number one issue that I see coming up with real estate investors. And oftentimes investors have great contractors that they work with. And the natural course of action is, well, the guy who's coming in who does all my drywall is going to just make the mold go away. However, I want to provide a word of caution on that because while they may be able to make the area look restored and brand new, what's behind the walls could still be very harmful and worse, potentially cause issues in some kind of a construction defect down the line. So some tips on that are, one, hire a remediation professional, someone who's certified who deals with mold remediation on a regular basis. Two, you want to make sure that testing is done when you have a mold issue arise, because even if I show an investor, they'll often ask for a copy of the invoice. And if I show you an invoice that shows here's what we did, there's still not a lot of proof that says this problem has been resolved. So we work hand in hand with third-party testing firms, environmentalists or industrial hygienists. There's a few different terms for them, who will come in and verify as a third party that, hey, the work that Best Option Restoration did here has been completed successfully. And that is a written document that I can now provide to the investor so that if they have a tenant down the line or the buyer who took the property, they're able to provide them written documentation. And let's say down the line in the exact same room that we worked in, that there's another mold issue. Well, there's documentation that shows, no, this was addressed. This problem must have occurred after, the date of the sale or after this, and it's new. So we did our due diligence. We did our part and did the right thing. And this is a separate issue.
That's super helpful. So when it comes to mold, right, there's a paper trail, there's a due diligence. And it sounds like, how you've kind of taken care of that at your company is you bring in independent testers. You're making sure that kind of before and after they have that evidence. So if down the road, instead of just going quickly through someone in the yellow pages or someone that might not have the experience, someone off next door, they're not going to really have that liability protection if they were to be sued down the road.
That's correct. We're looking out for you in the future.
All right, great. And so besides mold, what's another big issue that you have tips around? So
multiple times we have had properties under contract that have floods occurring at them. And while it can happen just by chance, there's other situations where there's actively repairs going on at the property, and maybe it's 10 degrees outside, and under the normal build out of the home, it could properly insulate the house from having a water pipe break. But let's say they're remodeling part of the home, they remove the drywall, perhaps they remove some insulation. So now we have pipes that are further exposed than they usually are. And that can cause a pipe to break. Sometimes when it's under contract, people aren't there every day. And next thing you know, you have the entire home flooded, literally the entire home flooded, and you have a very large restoration project on our hands. So my advice there is, if you are having a renovation project take place on a house that's on the market, or that you're flipping or prepping to rent out, ensure that you're keeping eyes on it and keep that HVAC temp turned up to at least 65 degrees during the winter to make sure that those pipes aren't going to have additional pressure on them when it gets cold.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So it seems like something that is like, at first, when you brought that up, I'm like, okay, it's under contract. What's the likelihood that you're going to have water damage? But then when you think about it, when people are under contract or they're, upgrading an investment, or they're doing something with the property to get ready to sell, they're doing a lot of construction. And if they're doing that construction during cold weather times, there's that vulnerability, and that
Yes.
completely makes sense. Like not having drywall up, not having the things that would normally protect it. All of a sudden it's like a Sunday snowstorm, nobody's working at the property, and the next day it's flooded.
Absolutely. And
Okay.
I referenced the HVAC already in regards to the construction, but other things that have happened is, hey, it's under contract. Somebody turns off the heat when they leave. It's a beautiful day. You're not even thinking about it. And then Colorado, being Colorado, has a significant drop in temperature, and that pipe breaks. When we're home, we get calls all the time for water damage. And when people are home, they'll stop it in 10 minutes and they still have thousands and thousands of dollars in water damage that they have to fix. So if you think about, well, what can 10 minutes do? How about if nobody's there and maybe it is a Sunday and now they go back the next day or a few days later, that project size only increases, because water has no feelings and it will go the path easiest to travel.
So one of the things that has come up a lot with some of the investors I work with is, the HVAC systems, the smart ones where you can kind of monitor it on your home phone or your cell phone and kind of track and make sure that it's always at the right temperature. And so you don't have this situation where people are coming in and out. But I guess, that's an upgrade you have to make before you do some investment. But is that something that is a good tool that you've come across for kind of regulating?
It is a great tool to have because you can monitor it remotely, and it's going to become the standard at some point. It already has started to. In addition, they also make water sensors that they even make entry-level ones that you can get at Home Depot that are pretty easy to install. There are more sophisticated ones that measures pressure in the pipes, and you can actually shut your water off remotely. But if at least having a sensor in there can give you an alert on your phone that you have a problem, and you can quickly have a neighbor go shut it off or drive over there and get it resolved as quickly as possible.
Well, that's super helpful. I wish I would have known that 2 summers ago when I got a big water bill after it was like an outdoor leak in the winter where we didn't notice for the sprinkler system.
Yeah. And
So
did it happen in the spring then when it came time to turn the sprinkler system back on? Yeah. Which leads us actually to some preventative maintenance that can be done. So if you are an investor and you have a property that is either being managed or maybe you manage it yourself, what you don't want to do is not check up on the property. And the biggest susceptible time is when we go from summer to winter, because things have happened since the previous winter. There's been time for the property to further deteriorate. Maybe somebody hit something, perhaps a piece of siding fell off, and now there's an exposed portion of the home that wasn't exposed before. But make sure every single year before we go into the winter that you're not only checking the home for possible air holes, you call it, but areas that maybe are under insulated. Also checking supply lines and valves and ensuring that they are up to standard. But one thing you want to look for is we have hard water here. And if you see a pipe where it's been leaking, you might see this white kind of calcified buildup, mineral deposits, or sometimes on the copper lines, you actually see like a green and white substance. And I have seen projects where it was such a small pinhole that happened that some of the leak was held back by simply the deposits that built up around that area. However, there was still, because it wasn't noticeable quickly, there still ended up being a mold remediation need at the property. It did save it from being a large project to a pretty isolated area. So that just goes to show, make sure you're updating your supply lines, make sure your valves are looking up to standard and they shut on and off well. If you have to try really hard to get it off or try really hard to get it on and you see perhaps some of that mineral buildup, it's time to change those out. And the next thing, which is even more important, is having your sprinklers winterized every year. It doesn't cost a lot. I know it's an additional expense, but it doesn't cost a lot. And it can certainly save you from turning your sprinklers on in the spring and having that water intrusion. those can be so devastating because from our experience, they're not always falling under insurance. And additionally, a lot of people don't go down in their basement regularly, and that type of loss is going to immediately impact the basement. And like I said, water doesn't have any feelings, and it'll just keep on spreading.
So winterizing sprinklers, making sure that you're kind of checking your valves, the entry points, different things like that. Any other tips from a preventative standpoint?
I think having good tenants, right? I think that's always, everybody wants good tenants. If you have tenants who care, they'll definitely look out for some of these things because, like I said, it only takes 10 minutes, but make sure you have a system in place to regularly check on the property in case of water intrusion.
That's so good. Okay, so everything goes bad. So, damage control, there's a bad leak, there's major damage. What are your tips for people who are dealing with that, or when they deal with it, what should they do?
Great question. As an investor, you want to before the emergency happens. I hope that you can sit down and meet me and talk with me and learn how we can serve you if the need comes up. But I hope you never need us, because once you need us, you needed us yesterday or 2 hours ago. And time is of the essence in water damage. So build a relationship ahead of time with a good restoration provider. And when it happens, you want to be able to call them and say, yeah, I need you out there right now, because time is of the essence with water damage. The longer that water sits there, the more damage that occurs. And if it goes from a water damage to a mold remediation, and I'll add that you can't have mold without moisture. So even if we have a room that has mold in it and maybe it dried out over time, which means it happened a while back, at one point there was still water there. What happens with, say, a small leak under a kitchen cabinet, and you don't know it's leaking because you never open up the kitchen cabinet, and then it rolls under the hardwood floor. You may not notice it until you start seeing some discoloration on the wood and potentially buckling on the floor. But that could take a couple of weeks with that type of a loss or that type of a leak. And so having somebody up front, but if there is a water event that's clearly emergency, it's urgent, a tenant comes home and they see their kitchen ceiling has fallen through, you need somebody on site, same day, next day, worst case, if that's what the situation requires, because things need to start happening quickly with water. I always say in water damage, if we're not improving, it's only getting worse. There's really no staying stagnant when it comes to a water damage incident. So build those relationships ahead of time with a trusted restoration provider so that you're prepared in the event that it does happen.
All right, great. Any other tips when it comes to restoration? Should you talk to the insurance company right away?
That is a great question. We recommend to our clients that they let us take a look at it first. Perhaps it's a pretty small incident. Sometimes, for example, somebody has a very minor plumbing failure of some sort on a valve, and it truly was just dripping, but somebody sees water and they kind of freak out and say, oh my goodness, I got to call my insurance company. I need to file a claim. And it's like, you just needed a plumber and perhaps a very minor amount of equipment, and it may not even go over your deductible. So we like to find out, hey, what's your deductible, and speak to the size of the project. And ultimately, it's certainly the client's decision, but we know the insurance agents that we work with, they don't like to see zero claims because it's not good for the clients even to have a $0 claim on their record. So in addition to that, we'll also help our client call the insurance company because we really partner with our clients when they have a need come up like that. And we're on the same team. So we communicate with the insurance agent, we communicate with our client, most importantly, and we communicate with the adjuster who is with the insurance carrier. So we'll assist in that process as well.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And I think a lot of people don't realize until it's too late and they make all these claims and then they're all of a sudden uninsurable, or it's really hard to get affordable insurance because they made these claims for things that they could have just paid out of pocket and really not taken that hit against themselves and their businesses.
Correct. Absolutely correct.
Great. Any other tips when it comes to restoration?
Oh, Well, speed is the number one thing. So don't hesitate to call a restoration provider. We're always available to come assess the situation and advise on here's what the next best steps are going to be. I think I covered them in our other tips, and yeah, I wish I had more to add, but I think we've really covered from a tip standpoint.
So when people are looking for a good restoration company, obviously I've worked with your team. You're amazing. So you have my endorsement, of course. But when people are looking around, when they're comparing and they're not sure what to do, what are some things when they're evaluating a restoration company that they should think about?
Yeah. So I think number one is, can they get there quickly? You really want somebody to get there quickly. And while they're talking to them on the phone, you should be looking at what are their Google rating, because Google really is a great place to filter those reviews out, and you want them to be highly rated. The next thing is you want to make sure they're insured. So they should all have a copy of their master insurance policy. It's a certificate of insurance, and they shouldn't have a problem sending that in. You also could ask for references. If you read the reviews, that's another spot for references. However, I know we have a references document on file that we would happily send over, and it has different clients we've worked with, from clients, insurance agents to property managers, and the like. And then lastly, you want to make sure they're certified. So you don't have to be certified to do the work that we do. However, the only way to ensure that they've had the proper training is to understand, are they a certified firm with the IICRC, which is a mouthful, but it's the Institute of Inspection, Cleaning and Restoration certification. So quite a mouthful, like I said, but there's a number of certifications they have. Our firm is certified through them, as well as various team members have various certifications that they offer to make sure that we're following the right standards of care for the project.
If people are working, like if they have an investment property that they're working with a property management company, does the property management company typically reach out to you and have the relationship with you, or are you typically working directly with the investor?
It's a case-by-case basis, but when there is a property manager involved, we are usually working directly with the property manager. Obviously, what the investor is kept in the loop on the process, and some managers will say, "Hey, copy the investor on every correspondence that we have," and others say, "Just let us know. We have an easy way or a great way of communicating with them." It's certainly case by case, but sometimes it is directly with the property owner. It kind of depends on as well how involved. Some investors want to be more involved than others, and there are certain sensitive situations we get in sometimes with tenants. That's why handling a claim to standards or a water damage to standards is so important, because you're really trying to cover yourself from having liability down the line.
Do you work statewide or kind of the Denver metro area? What is kind of the territory your company serves?
Good question. We have worked as far as Fairplay, and we've gone down to Colorado Springs, and we've gone up to Fort Collins before, and pretty far out east. However, 90+% of our projects are in the greater Denver metro area. So think of Boulder and Broomfield and Thornton, down to Castle Rock, Parker, out to Aurora, out over to Golden. That's where our majority of our projects are. But some of our clients like us to go a little bit farther away for certain projects, and we're happy to help them with that.
What is the best way, if people are listening and they want help or they want to build that relationship with you for future things that could come up? What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
The best way is to call our phone number, which is, should I say it?
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. Which is 720-408-1688. And I'll paint a little picture for you briefly. If somebody goes home, or if an investor gets a call from a tenant who goes home from work, they've had a really long day, they take that first step inside and they smell this musky, nasty smell. And then they look up at the kitchen ceiling, and there's drywall on their kitchen table and all over their oven. And so they run downstairs to try to get away from it all. And they step onto the carpet, which is now a swimming pool that has a carpeted floor. it's an emergency. So the best way to call us so that we can dispatch promptly is to call that number, which was 720-408-1688.
Okay, great. And we'll include your website and your phone number in the show notes as well. Our final question that I ask all the guests, Kyle, is what is your legacy? What is the legacy you are building?
Our legacy is to leave the world better than we found it. And that goes with how we really treat all of our relationships, from vendors to clients to employees, to even salespeople when they're annoying me and all of that. We want to leave the world better than we found it.
Well, thank you so much for being on our podcast today, Kyle.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
If you need an updated will, trust, or estate plan, and you are a Colorado resident, we would love to be your estate planning law firm. Give us a call at 720-706-0036 to schedule your complimentary 15-minute call. You can also directly schedule at lawmother.com/go. If you liked this episode and you want to learn more, you should definitely check out my international best-selling book, Legally Ever After. It's available on Amazon as both an ebook, a paperback, and an audio version. And if you'd like a free chapter, head over to lawmother.com/LEA.